Rick, why don't you go ahead and kick this off with your staff and Sarah and Chris, and just jump on in there to the budget development.
Okay, good enough. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing an introductory presentation here. I'm going to turn it over to Chris fairly quickly. But just to put it in a little bit of context, the board, we began the budget process pretty early this year, given all the budget uncertainty that we saw on the horizon at that time. And what you're going to see initially is the result of that work up to about 2 weeks ago. And then there's some things we need to talk about going forward. Obviously, the world has changed substantially. That's going to have an impact on our budget development. But Chris is going to walk us through that. We're going to try to, my hope is that this allows a forum for the board to understand the thinking on our part at this juncture and help us and provide us with some direction and insight and thoughts about how we might move forward as we continue to develop the budget. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chris.
In the chat, I just shared the attached documents for individuals who may have joined who weren't part of the email distribution. So if you would like to follow along with the attachments, they were just loaded into the chat function. Just to get started, trustees, I want to thank you for this opportunity just to kind of go through where we are. Dr. McLennan, thank you for setting this up. I wanted to share a little bit about the current fiscal picture of the college, walk through the monthly financials and the current quarterly financials, and answer any questions that the board may have on those topics. Talk about where we are with budget development pre-COVID-19, and then some of the impacts and assumptions, and also work with Dr. McLennan to share some thought process behind the development of a potential promise model. And then very much hoping this is a discussion tonight with the board, and we're seeking your direction on a couple of key topics. So feel free to chime in as we go through this. We will figure out how to talk not over each other together, and we'll get started here. Just to kind of bring us up to speed on this, in the attachments, everyone has a copy of the full February actual financial statements. I want to thank Sarah Garcia and her team. They do a really great job of closing out each month and allowing us to do a really clear look at where we are. The good news is nothing's changed dramatically from what you've seen as we've shared these throughout the year. On the operating revenue side, we're trending about 20% off of our budget or our plan in tuition and fees. And you'll see an enrollment report tonight and a couple of things to be aware of. We based our budget off of the budget of the prior fiscal year, hoping that we could make up a little bit of ground. So why there's a variance between this and the actual enrollment is we made a decision to base our enrollment forecasts off of last year's budgets, not last year's actual enrollments. And that was an attempt to really push us to be aggressive and be, I guess, bullish, if you will, on where we were going to be with enrollment. You can tell that we didn't make it quite where we thought we were going to make it. Another key aspect to remember is NIC has traditionally brought in 60% of their tuition and fee revenue in the fall and 40% in the spring. And what we've seen specifically this year is it's been a 50-50 split, which has put some more pressure on spring than maybe we've had in the past. Looking, on down, overall revenue remains incredibly strong. So overall, we're doing fine. We're 4% off of our plan, which would be, any year would be a good place for us to be, is just 4% off on revenue. If we look at the expense side on that, and I don't have this up for everyone to view, it's on your attachments if you want to see it. On the expense side, I have a really touchy mouse here. Our overall expenses are trending really, really well. And they're trending better than planned, and we would expect them to be at this particular time of the year. And a big part of that has been driven by personnel expenses. And so we've talked a lot about our leaving positions open, only refilling when we have to, and managing specifically our adjunct pools. And so that's what's really helped our overall expense to date. Everything else is trending well. It's not where we would plan it to be at this time of year, which would be in line with what you would expect if we were down in revenue. Our expenses are also trending down. At the current moment, the other piece that I think is an important piece is total net income continues to be a really positive thing. And we'll see that as we look at our forecast. Any questions specifically on the February income statement?
Hey, Chris, this is Todd. When I look at the other non-operating revenues, I want to make sure I'm understanding those last three lines that I'm seeing on the page 1 of 2, and I'm looking at the additional ones that were sent out, so I printed them off, so I've got them front and back, so I have the second page. So I'm also looking at the expense page, and I see the different, I see the payroll, I see the benefits, I see the general expenses, and I see the -8, the -10, the -3. Then I get to the equipment and capital investment, and I see the it says -53 under the net income. I'm not sure I'm understanding that number.
The issue that you're referring to, I think we have a better solution if we look at the actual forecasted net income. It's because of where we are this time of year. It's calculating based off of where we would be whole for the year. So on the actual net income piece for the year to date on the monthly income statements, that percentage piece isn't very helpful.
Okay. Well, when I look at the budget, for example, though, it says other non-operating revenues, and on the far left-hand side, I've got a budget that says 778, 760. Then when I track that across to the right-hand side, I've got a year-to-date budget underneath that column. It says 517, 437. Then I've got the year-to-date variance and the percent. So which number of those two do I really want to look at? Because it says year-to-date actual percentage for the total budget on that same line says 98%. So how do I want to read that line?
I believe that is 48%. On the very right-hand side of the other non.
At the far right, it's 48. To the left, it says year-to-date actual percentage of total budget.
Oh, thank you for that.
48% was the percent variance.
What I would focus your attention on is that 48% at the very end. And so overall, for this at this time of year to date, we're at $766,000 on a budget of 778 is where we are right now. We're trending really well. The year-to-date budget is, we break that budget up into 12 categories so that we can just kind of track where we should be this time of year. Is that helpful?
Okay. No, it is. So I'm looking at the 766 versus the 778, which gives me the percent of the total budget of 98%.
Correct.
Then to the right of that, I've got the number that says year-to-date budget. So how does that number?
We're 48% ahead of our. We're 48% ahead of our budget.
Okay. Okay. So that's where we should be if we were straight lined, essentially.
For this moment in time. So this moment in time, okay, we would normally be at $249,000, and we're at 766. So we're trending really ahead.
Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure I understood what I was seeing there. Okay. Thank you.
If we move to the overall year-end forecast, I think this will provide a little bit better snapshot. We're already, basically we've collected all of the revenue we're going to collect. And so this is a forecast looking at where we would go and where we're planning on ending the year at. So looking at revenue for the year, again, this is in line with what we thought would happen all year long and what we've showed you. We're estimating or forecasting we're going to be 14% down in our operating revenues, which is tuition and fees, and our overall revenues for the entire year, we're going to be down approximately 3%. So looking at the end of the year, we're anticipating a total revenue of $49.4 million on a budget of $50.6 million. So that 3% variance there is that $1.2 million that you're seeing in that right-hand column. It continues to look good as you go through expenses. On the next page of that, on the back side, we've got the expenses there. And right now for a forecast, we're forecasting $48.6 million in expense on a budget of 50.7. This actually already includes all of the special early retirement program costs and the accrued leave payouts.
Hey, Chris, this is Todd again. Kind of a strange question maybe, but ironically, we may experience a little more savings because we basically shut down operations. So things like utilities, some of our fixed costs might even be reduced over the next month or two. There's no commencement. Athletics have been canceled for the spring. Do we see some adjustment in some of those numbers because of the lack of campus activity and extracurricular activities and things like that?
So
Because we've got all our revenues in, everybody's paid, so.
Yep. So Trustee Banducci, I appreciate that question. This forecast was completed pre-COVID-19. And so you're absolutely right that there may be some further savings that we pull into this forecast. So in many ways, I expect this to get better. There are some unknowns still in how we handle some of the COVID-19 related expenses that haven't hit. And
Right.
so also just to be aware of that, we are also spending money that we didn't plan on spending around custodial and janitorial supplies, some emergency IT, some other things to support remote instruction. So while your premise is absolutely correct, we are seeing some flux in that. And the good news in all of this is right now we're forecasting a net income of $811, and that's being driven off of primarily payroll expense savings.
Chris, $811,000.
811,000, thank you.
Chris, this is Christy. Some of those expenses you're talking about, the emergency IT, are those going to be something we can capture from the federal government?
We're capturing the expense.
Go ahead.
We're capturing the expense. At this moment in time, we're capturing all those so that in the event there's a reimbursement mechanism, we're able to submit those as a disaster expense.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, this is Joe. How is tuition being handled with the students? Is it a non-issue, or are there refunds that we're expected to provide? How's that being handled?
I'm going to jump in and allow Dr. McLennan and Dr. Burns to weigh in on this as well. I think you've hit one of the biggest aspects of the impact of COVID-19. For many of our students, we anticipate to continue out the semester just as is, and they'll receive the value that they were anticipating for the education that we're providing. There are some unique circumstances around clinicals and some other lab components that students may receive an incomplete and are allowed to prove out their competencies after the official end of the semester. I'm going to defer to Dr. McLennan and Dr. Burns if they would like to provide some more insight on that.
Sure. I got to unmute here. No, I am unmuted. So one of the things that we're talking about, and we haven't finalized this yet, Joe, is the idea of a possible credit to be extended into the fall semester. So what we're calling a WC. So a student that's not able to complete their course this semester, we would allow them to carry that credit as a credit forward into the fall semester and be able to take the course, at that time. But our hope, at least what we're working towards right now, is that by moving a substantial percentage of what we're doing into a virtual format and being able to support that, and then taking care of those things, as Chris said, that will need some extension beyond the normal semester, and possibly in the form of an incomplete, that will steer students towards that. They've already completed a substantial amount of work in the current semester, so we're hoping and thinking that there's an interest on their part to continue this work to get the credit in the environment that we're in. So right now we're not talking wholesale refunds to students.
Good. Chris, this is Christy. On on the end of the year forecast, pre-COVID, looks very good. And so obviously kudos to the team. Can you tell me what steps you took to get us there?
Primarily, it was being very, very judicious with the rehires and leaving positions open as long as we can without impacting services in a dramatic way to students and to staff members and operations. When the board allowed us to have an early look at the budget this year in October, it really allowed us to, again, take a long-term approach at what needed to structurally change as we go into the next 3 years. And given many things, including the very difficult relationship with the state this year on funding and the heads up they gave us that we're not going to have funding like we've had it in the past, and there's going to be a rescission, it allowed us to start looking at this really, really early and making some maybe harder decisions than we would normally make with holding positions. So a lot of this is attrition and salary savings.
Okay, well, really good work.
If it's all right, I'd like to move on to the reserves. I think right now that's probably maybe more important than it typically is. And so the board's aware. Inside your packet is an actual cash snapshot. We do this. Sandra Jaco, our assistant controller and treasury manager, does a fantastic job managing our cash. And so that's, I guess from my position, that's the most important function of this office is cash management. Where we are right now from a general operating reserve is if we were to right this minute have to access general fund reserve, there'd be $7.5 million available in the general fund reserve for operating. In the capital reserve today, $12.3 million available in the capital board designated reserve. And so I wanted to bring the board kind of along with us as we look at our current fiscal picture. We're in really good shape, and I am really thankful to be at North Idaho College facing a crisis like COVID-19. There's a lot of colleges that are having to make some serious scrambles because they're not in the position that we are today. And so I want to thank you for your stewardship and especially the foresight to allow the level of reserve development that we've had. But just so you're aware, that's where we are today. If you look at the actual cash management document, we're obviously sitting on a lot more cash than $7.5 million. But I want to remind everyone, the reason that we keep that reserve balance there in part is because there's a low water mark that comes at the end of the fiscal year where we don't have tuition coming in, we don't have tax revenue coming in, and we're obviously making payroll, cleaning up our buildings, making repairs, doing all the things that you want us to do. And so this allows us that buffer as well as giving us that operating margin for times such as this.
Hey, Chris, this
Yes.
is Todd. You just mentioned, I believe, or made reference to one of the other documents that was sent to us in one of the other PDFs. I'm looking at the North Idaho College Cash Balance Report as of Friday, March 20th, 2020. Is that what you were just referring to about some of the other accounts where there's some funds?
Yes, sir, absolutely. So on that report, what you'll see is general fund, a payroll account, an EFT loan account, which is not ours, if you will. That's where the federal government puts in financial aid dollars. And then what's currently in the FSA HRA accounts, which are employee accounts that we're just managing that cash on their behalf. And then there's the general fund, and then there's the board designated piece. And so the general fund that you're seeing there in the board designated piece, those sit in a pooled investment account with the state of Idaho. And so one of the things that if you pay attention into the details on some of the financials in that other revenue, up until recently, we've had some really impressive returns and interest income. We keep most of our funds within that LGIP managed account so that it's earning investment returns, and we transfer money out into the general operating fund on an as needed basis as we make payroll and as we pay bills.
Now, Chris, and maybe this isn't the right question with the information that's provided on this form, because I noticed like there's even stuff on area agency on aging, sorry, excuse me, and stuff like that. Is there a way that I could reverse engineer back to come up with that 7.5 million? Because I see where the board designated reserve matches up on the slide to the form, the 12,393, the 12.4 million. The 7.5 million, if I was looking at this, what would I see that as comprised of?
It doesn't work out quite this way, but looking at this particular form, you take the $16 million that was in the bank account as of 3/20, and you subtract out that low water mark on July the 5th of $6 million. That's the closest you can see it on this. The general fund reserve isn't calculated based off of cash. It's actually an accounting calculation that takes into things that are found on our audited financial statements at the end of the year.
That's what I suspected, and that's why I was hedging the question a little bit to try to see how I would make sense of that number just based on the information on this sheet. And to your point, I can't directly get there, I don't think. So
correct.
I can get in the ball game, it sounds like, the ballpark.
Absolutely. And if you'd like, I can share with you last year's total cash report, and it'll also be clearer as you look at the whole year as a picture. This is the running total for the current fiscal year.
All right, thank you.
Great questions. With kind of where we are today, where we find ourselves in the midst of COVID-19, there is some unique fiscal uncertainty and enrollment uncertainty that we're facing. And with that, one of the things that we'd like to get the board's direction on tonight is a proposal to put a hard pause on the development of the Meyer Health Science Expansion project. This project will be ready for bid, shovel ready on April the 15th, final, everything done, state review, total 100% cooked. All that we'll be waiting for is to move it to bid. Given some of the uncertainty and not exactly able to predict at this moment where and how this recession might hit, it's difficult for us to forecast when enrollment might correspond with that recession. And so this is an area that we're considering, that we'd like you to consider, is allowing us to pause on that, because we're at a perfect place right now to just say pause and then restart that later this fiscal year when we've got a lot more clarity around enrollment specifically.
Chris, this is Joe. I've got a couple comments. One is recognizing there is quite a bit of uncertainty. As we all know, our enrollment is very cyclical, and when people are laid off from work is when they end up coming back to school, virtually or otherwise. And so even though we may be projecting a considerable reduction in students in the fall, that may or may not manifest itself based on what's happening employment-wise. The second comment I guess I'd like to make is that as you showed us, there's over 12 million in the capital reserve. The project, I believe, was about 8.3 million or something along those lines. So we've got the money to handle that. Plus, we've got over 7 million in our operating reserve. So I understand being cautious and possibly wanting to pause, and I'm not opposed to that, but I don't see anything necessarily that would say we need to put the brakes on right now.
So I have just a couple comments, and Trustee Dunlap, I understand and in part agree with everything, your assessment. One of the things that's bothering me a little bit about this one is the unemployment rate right now is highly located in the service sector and in these public facing positions. I don't know think one of our big areas of uncertainty is post COVID-19. Are they going to be? Is the unemployment situation going to quickly correct itself, or is it going to be more like a financial meltdown of 2008? So they're two very different unemployment conditions that led to that. And so I am concerned certainly about fall enrollment right now, and the decisions that people are making who are going fully into these online environments and what their experiences are like. And we're working through that and trying to plan and design responses to deal with that. But there is a lot of uncertainty there. The other concern that, and we don't have to make a decision right this minute, is that if we do get into a really significant financial challenge, we do have reserves to help with that, to be sure. I feel good about that. But there may be some changes in our workforce overall that we may need to continue to perhaps accelerate not renewing positions, and we haven't gotten into a scenario yet where we're looking at program closure or RIF or anything like that. I just want to have those considerations in the context of beginning a construction project, a major capital project in the environment. But there's just a lot of uncertainty right now.
Yeah, appreciate that perspective. And those are certainly warranted considerations. So thank you for that explanation.
Mr. Chair, just quick comments. The uncertainty is, I think we're all feeling that. And I'm wondering, we don't even know when we'll be back in our buildings. And as much as we want to do this project, because we know it's going to be a project that improves our situation for students for years to come, I don't know that it's a bad idea to pause until fall. And trust me, it pains me to say that. And I don't even know when we would have the discussion on an agenda for an actual decision. But right now, we don't know when we're going to be back in our facilities. So it maybe seems it's a little frightening to go out and start building a new facility.
Yeah, good point.
If I may, this is Todd, excuse me, Chair Dunlap. If I may piggyback a thought on what Christy just said, and I don't want to overemphasize this or make too big a deal of it, but being a public institution, we do have to be, I guess, conscious of the perception or the appearance of moving forward and maybe spending $8.3 million while people are struggling to make their rent and pay their bills and they're out of work with this strange situation that we're in. So I guess not that I'm a guy that's usually overly sensitive, but in this context, maybe just from the sake of appearances, again, not to put too much weight on it, but just something to consider if it looks like we're moving forward and we're spending a bunch of money while people are struggling for basic necessities right now. And one of the points that Chris made in his letter that he put together for us was, if this is a significant recession or down period of time that extends into next year, the irony of it is we may actually be able to do this for a lower price, just because people might be getting a little bit hungry. And I know that sounds a little opportunistic, but it is capitalism, and it is what it is, and people will bid accordingly. We've been in an environment where people have had so much work that a lot of times an extra job or a new job is kind of an afterthought, and they'll take it at the right price point. Or we could be in a very different situation in the year, and who knows what our need will be. So just a couple of small things to consider, I think, as we look at this.
Yeah, those are all excellent points. And I think on all the comments, very valid points. So I appreciate the perspectives there.
Chair Dunlap, we appreciate just the opportunity to bring this forward and have a discussion. We do anticipate that with even where things are at this moment, we'll get a better bidding climate if we were to pause this project. And so that's another consideration. Again, maybe not the best approach from a decision-making aspect, but it would be if we could get this project complete for less money, we'd obviously be interested in that proposal as well.
Chris, I know we haven't shared this widely, but do you want to, if we did run into a challenge where we did need some wet lab space fairly quickly, you want to talk about another idea that would be fairly inexpensive and allow us to meet our demand fairly quickly?
One conversation we've had briefly is we've looked at, I think Dr. McLennan has encouraged us to find the opportunities within the COVID-19 situation. And one of those opportunities has been looking at how and where we deliver our courses. And so one of the conversations we've had briefly is the possibility of turning a classroom space at the Parker Technical Education Center into a wet lab. The board may remember, I think it's actually been 2 years now. Over the summer, 2 years ago, we moved the HVAC program from the Headland building and totally placed it within an existing classroom at the Parker Technical Education Center. I think we learned a lot from that project, but what we did learn is, again, that building was built with flexibility in mind. And even though we had to provide additional plumbing and power to move that program, we were able to accomplish that in fairly quick order at a nice price point, to be frank. We believe we could duplicate those efforts to some degree to add science lab capacity at Parker.
Well, that's good.
Dr. McLennan, I don't know if that covers that, or if you'd like to add.
That was all. I think
Chris?
that's what I was trying to address. So if we do have a short-term, if we do have additional lab needs that develop in this uncertain environment that we're in right now, we do have a potential solution that might meet both a short-term and a long-term need as far as offering instruction, laboratory instruction. So thank you, Chris.
May I ask a question, please? This is Todd. First off, that's very interesting. Appreciate you guys sharing that. Is that square footage currently available, or is that square footage that could be made available with just a little bit of construction or modification or addition?
It would be within the current footprint, Trustee Banducci, for us to do that. So what we would anticipate doing if this was to occur is we'd take a classroom that's currently designated as a classroom at Parker and retrofit that as a lab. It would not be an expansion of the footprint. It would be essentially a remodel of existing space.
All right, thank you. That's what I thought I understood. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. Thank you.
In the effort to fully offer disclosure, and the fact that Dr. Burns is on this call, I want to just make sure I'm sharing the full picture here. There are other components of offering a lab that obviously would not be as efficient to take it and move it off campus, but we are seeing more and more demand for, we anticipate more demand for people to have proximate classes to where they're living. And as we see the population growth on the Rathdrum Prairie, it just allows us to again, meet needs in a different way and perhaps offer learning closer to home. But there would be some expense with operating a lab outside of our current laboratory settings. If it's okay, Chair Dunlap, we'll just move into the budget scenario. So
before you move on, Chris, Chair Dunlap, do we have a time frame on when we would have to make a decision on something like this if we were to choose to make the delay?
I'm going to defer to President McLennan. I'm not sure what that would entail, but I would expect at the next board meeting that if we made a delay, that would be an action item at the April meeting.
Well, make sure in the memo that in the one pager that Chris presented for you, the decision, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, we need to make a decision on this before the next board meeting.
It's scheduled to go to bid at this moment, and I have not talked to the architects directly until after we've had a chance to visit with the board. I have talked to John Young, and we've talked about this potential, and John Young's response to me was essentially, I've been waiting on your phone call. I knew you would call me and make this suggestion. He was in support of this and the fact that it made really good financial sense at this moment. And if we didn't have to have the square footage online exactly at the time that we planned it, we have an opportunity. I believe the board has given us authorization to move forward on this project. We have that authorization, but even if it was just direction that we were going to delay this bid until at least the April 25th board meeting, we could do that.
Yeah, the other alternative would be that if the recommendation is to delay this project, we could have a very short virtual special meeting to approve that if necessary.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
My question is, do we even have to do a formal approval like that? Because we've given them the ability to move forward. It seems that would also just automatically have the ability to pause. So my question is if we even need a board vote on that.
Well, that's a real good point. And I think I tend to agree with you that maybe we don't need to have a special vote. That's clearly within the purview of the authorization to go forward with the project. And I don't believe we gave a timeline in that authorization.
Correct. So I guess what I would suggest is that we just honor that and allow them to press pause if that is what is probably in our best interest. And I trust that they have our best interest at heart here.
Yeah, Todd and Brad and Ken, if you're on, would you agree with that sentiment?
I agree. However, I think it might be better to show who's on board with that by voting. Just it's as easy to vote and get that over with. And I just think it makes better sense that we're all on the same page. Maybe we're not.
Yeah, it's just at a workshop we can't take a board action.
Understood.
Like that. And that was the genesis of my comment about potentially having a short special meeting. Todd, in general, are you supportive of Christie's sentiment?
I am. And I understand Brad's position and the merit to want to have everybody on record officially, formally. So if you want to do the vote, I'm fine with that. If we can set it up. I don't know that we have to have it, but again, maybe that's something we should do anyway. And I think to Christie's point, I think we've given them the discretion, the leeway, the authorization. So I think, yeah, whether they move forward, pause, or all that, I think that is within the purview of our working group, Chris and the gang. So yeah, I don't see a problem with her interpretation of that at all.
Okay. Ken Howard, are you on the line? All right.
Chair Dunlop?
Yeah.
I'm getting text messages from my team who's listening, and based on the current latest version of the schedule, the April 25th board meeting will not be a problem.
Okay.
We can make that work.
All right. Well, if we need to, we can take a vote then. If we determine between now and then we don't need a vote, then you can press forward with that.
Thank you.
Very good.
Okay, Chris, drive on.
So the pre-COVID-19 current budget proposal looks almost exactly like what was presented at the October board meeting, the October board workshop for the budget. This budget includes no tuition increase, no tax increase. It remains a forecast of a 3% decline in enrollment. One quick note, we would do that based off of actuals this year and not budget. And then it includes that 3-year plan for stabilizing the budget using some fund balance over time. It also included a step for all employees. You have this in your packet, and it's just a quick review kind of where we thought we would be and where we actually are on our projected budget. What is really key here, and I know it just drive to, is the target budget cuts for the college were $992,000. The college came up with one a little bit less than $1.1 million, actually a little bit more than, $1 million in budget cuts. That's a substantial reduction, and I want to share my appreciation to the leadership across campus, specifically our division chairs and our management team members who oversee budgets. They did a fantastic job. And so this budget development as planned at this moment has not included personnel. It was specifically targeted towards operational efficiencies that could be created. And so that was not a focus on personnel reduction, it was on operational efficiencies. There were included in this budget the savings from the early retirement program, as well as attrition. With this, we've also included some money for FY21 budget priorities. And so there's an expense category there specifically for the fact that we're entering a very uncertain time going into this, this particular fiscal year. And at this moment in time, I think we've actually got a solid plan that will allow us to address some of the concerns that are coming out of COVID-19, but wanted to give an update of where we were. And so at this moment, it doesn't include levers such as a tuition increase or a tax increase. Those aren't on the table, but wanted to, again, defer back to the board for direction on where you were thinking about this fiscal year, maybe pre-COVID-19, and especially now with the circumstances that we're under.
This is Todd. Chair Dunlap, I have a question for Chris.
Yeah, shoot.
Chris, what does the step cost us for the full-time employees?
I should have had that on the tip of my tongue, to be honest with you. Let me pull that right quick. Let me rotate that screen.
And then while you're researching that, I guess my second question would be, what does a 3% decline in enrollment as you're amortizing that out, what does that equate to?
The 3% decline in enrollment is around $375,000.
Chris, you have the step here as $465,750.
Thank you for that, Dr. McLennan. So $465,000 for the step.
Well, something tells me that the CPI is going to be negative for a while. Inflation just went down, I think. So maybe that's something to rethink about too, because almost $500,000, that becomes a fairly significant number in today's environment.
Chair Dunlap, if I may.
Yeah, you bet.
One thing to be aware of is surprisingly enough, the state did fund a CEC this year, and so there is a partial offset from the state on the CEC. Another piece just to be mindful of, and I appreciate your perspective there, Trustee Banducci, but what we've seen in the past is when we do go into tighter times in a recessionary environment, the state typically does not provide any support for CECs. And so at this moment, the state is providing that. So I would recommend that we take them up on their offer to help fund CEC this year.
May I ask approximately how much that helps offset that $465,000?
Less than, I believe, $200,000.
So the
okay. Let me make sure. So the state's providing about 200,000 of the 465. Did I understand you correctly?
No,
It's actually less than that.
no, the 465,000, Chris, represents the amount after we account for the percent for CEC from the state, correct?
We got 183,000 from the state, and I'm pulling that up now.
So the step is that amount from the state plus $465,750.
Okay,
That's
so
correct,
it's in
'cause we get
addition to the money.
We just get a portion of the funding from the state, approximately a third.
So the real cost of that step then is about $648,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
From what I understand, though, Chris, that the funds that come from the state certainly can't be used for anything else.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And if we don't take
Okay.
them now, it's a use or lose?
It's a use or lose, correct. We would have to return it if we didn't accept it.
Yeah. That would be unheard of. But I think we have a lot of time for discussion on salary. It's good to have the numbers in front of us, but we won't go into those deep discussions probably until about May, right?
The planned first budget workshop would be in April, and the final
Okay.
vote would be in May.
Okay.
So at this, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that timeline is a pre-COVID timeline. There could be something that, as much as we don't want to get off of that timeline, there may be some other considerations that we need to consider.
Yeah.
That is the plan right now, April and May.
Okay.
All right.
So we really felt like this budget was again, a solid plan for pre-COVID for sure. And I think that for the most part, the skeleton of this budget will serve us well in a post-COVID environment. A couple of things just to mention, and Chair Dunlap brought this up at the beginning, impacts around disruption of course delivery. If we extend the semester, if there's a credit, as Dr. McLennan mentioned, if we were to, students who couldn't complete, we gave them a credit to take a course again in the fall at no cost. Obviously that has to be factored in. We're really, really closely looking at the impact on retention at this moment. I appreciate especially Dr. Burns and the instructional team have really done a fantastic job, a yeoman's effort, reaching out to students, trying to make accommodations and do whatever we can to help students complete the semester successfully. Student Services is also reaching out. They're receiving lots of phone calls from students. But the key is some students chose to take an on-campus, in-person class for a reason and may not continue with us, even with our best efforts at delivering remote education. And so we're doing our best to keep those students engaged, give them a valuable experience so that they continue with us in the fall and they don't just give up on education because of this current crisis. The other piece is an impact on, yes, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is Todd. You know, I was talking to Ted Tedman. Many of you know Ted. And Ted started out with about 4 classes in person and 4 classes online, and then obviously all 8 have been converted to online. But he spoke to that situation that you just mentioned, Chris. So I guess I want to put a little color to it, because there are some students that are, for various reasons, very resistant to going, and that's why they weren't in an online class initially. And so I know he and many of the other instructors, again, these are kudos to Lita and the team, are working really hard to try to accommodate those, but there are going to be some that you're just not going to get there with, it sounds like. There's some real challenges with some of that. And some of it may be fear of the technology, lack of technology, or just all the above, or other things, you know. Can't account for all the reasons why, but that was a conversation he and I happened to have this past week, actually, to kind of chat about some of what's going on.
No, and thank you for that. That's exactly the concerns that we're trying to mitigate for our students and keep our retention up as high as possible. The other piece is this does throw into a little bit as yet unknown how students and families are going to respond. And so the fall enrollment, depending again on the severity of this recession, the timing of this recession, we may not see students come to us exactly in the fall. And so we just want to be mindful of trying our best to manage that curve. We feel like with this budget, specifically, if we were to have an influx of students, we would go back to our tried and true offering overloads and adjuncts to meet the course demand, especially in the short term. And this budget framework would allow us to do that. Dr. McLennan, do you want to add anything regarding impacts and assumptions?
No, I think you've covered it. There's so much uncertainty right now. Things are changing still by the hour in terms of what's going on and our response to it, but I think you've covered it well. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the board specifically on the budget or anything that we can provide more detail on?
Chris, this is Christy. You've given us a lot of good detail, and we can go back over it ourselves. I think the best part about what you've all done is the early planning that started in the fall and then bringing us together now in March with this workshop. So really appreciate the efforts of everyone to give us all the scenarios.
This is Todd. I do have a question. Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead, Todd.
All right. Sorry, Joe. Rick, Lita, I know it's tremendously challenging times, so this may be an unfair question, but as we're trying to think about how to get through the end of the spring semester and getting people their credits and completing the courses and just, all the rest that goes with that, how do we have an eye towards our normal summer offerings and the timeline for when we would normally start those, registrations and enrollments and start to push and advertise and stuff like that? What does this do for us for a timeline as we start to think about the summer term? And when would we have to be geared up and have a little more sense of how we're proceeding? Where are we at with that? I'm kind of thinking of that next step.
So I want Lita to weigh in on this, but I just will tell you that all of our work right now is addressing all of these issues in terms of planning future forward. How are we going to build enrollment for the fall? We had a very focused discussion on summer enrollment yesterday afternoon and talked about some strategies that seem worth pursuing. So Lita, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, thank you, Dr. McLennan. And Trustee Banducci, we are actually, as Rick has stated, engaged already in these discussions. Had a really good discussion yesterday with the instructional leadership team, talking about what potentially we can do for summer and how do we plan forward for summer. Right now, we actually, I would say, we're a little bit behind on where we would like to be enrolling students in summer and getting all of that going, but we're pushing forward as quickly as we can. Again, it's the uncertainty. We don't know if we're going to be in our classrooms or whether we're going to continue online and how that's going to look. So, actually having a plan A and a plan B for summer is what we're doing. And then as quickly as we can get that in place and advertised and recruiting students towards that, thinking about fall. And we are all extremely hopeful, being very optimistic and positive that in fall, we will hopefully be back business as usual and people can settle back in. This has given us an opportunity, though, to really explore this online teaching and learning. We want to make sure that as we move forward, we take every consideration of the stress and anxiety and challenge this has created for students and giving them options in the future too. We may see us, NIC may be starting to do more online classes, but we may not either, because again, we want to serve the students we have always served. And if the demand is for face-to-face, we will certainly meet the demand. If the demand is for a more mixed offering of courses, we'll make it mixed. But we're going to make sure that we serve our students well, but absolutely those discussions are occurring daily.
Now, Lita, under normal circumstances, approximately when would the summer term begin? Can you remind me of that?
It usually begins 2 weeks after the commencement. So we would be, I think our summer school is scheduled, I want to say for like the 1st of June currently on our calendar. I don't know that we'll change that. We have to see if that changes over the next couple weeks. I would hope that we don't change that date, but we certainly have got to figure that out in our planning.
All right, well, that would be consistent with the commencement was supposed to be on the 15th, so that puts you right about the 1st of June. Okay. Guess we'll see.
Indeed.
Thank you.
So as we look at
You were asking for some comments, and you mentioned that we may have a workshop in April. And what I would suggest is that we focus on that slide that you have, which is, just a second, I'll pull it up here. Slide 9 out of 14, the fiscal year budget scenario. You've represented pre-COVID-19, and you've got 5 components there that would significantly impact our budget and budget planning. And so at the April workshop, I would suggest that we focus on those items, the impact of those items, what that does in terms of revenue, and whether or not we need to adjust any of those items.
Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Chris, are you still going to speak to the Promise Scholarship Program?
If it's the will of the board.
Sure.
I didn't mean to cut you off. It just sounded like we kind of wrapped that up, and I was curious if you were going to go ahead and do that or not.
Absolutely. I think with the budget, one other quick piece is, as we look at this fiscal year and kind of where we are, there's some impacts as we plan our summer that have a little impact. Summer hits both fiscal years. And so that's some other modeling that we'll look at. And that's one reason why it's so important that we had projected net income at this moment. We're not going to end the year with that level of net income, in part because some of the changes that may come from summer or from extending the semester. So just to keep that in the board's mind, I want to be really upfront. That was where we were pre this situation. And so we'll continue to provide an updated forecast as we get more information about how we move forward with summer. For the Promise Scholarship, Dr. McLennan, do you want to tee this up, or would like me to move on? You're on mute. I apologize.
I can see I'm on mute. No, I'm not. So, no, thanks, Chris. So I asked Chris to put this in, if for no other reason than a placeholder discussion for the board. Some board members have been more engaged in this conversation than others, only because, for example, Trustee Dunlap was part of the foundation board retreat in which the foundation board has some interest in looking at scholarships, and I did a presentation of what a Promise Scholarship might look like for North Idaho College. Since then, there's been some more thinking and structuring around that, but essentially the reason we're even on this to begin with started from the idea that, we know that we have a substantial amount of our population that's at or below that ALICE population level. We know we have a significant go-on rate, continue to have a significant go-on rate in Idaho. Depending on which community you're talking about, it can be anywhere between 40 and 50% of students who go on or who don't go on, I'm sorry. And then connecting that to the labor gap in North Idaho. And so as we started thinking about this, the legislature also began looking at property tax reform. And one of our thoughts, and in your handouts, you have a model of, and it's a fairly conservative model of what it would take to provide a Promise type scholarship over a 3-year period of time for the average number of students over the last 5 years coming out of a Kootenai High School, homeschool, or GED, NIC GED program, and then a calculation of what that would cost if enrollment from that population, those populations were to increase by 25%. And you can see that at the bottom of that page in year 3, again, these are estimates, that hits a little bit over $1 million to do that. That would effectively be about the amount that a $20 million endowment generate for a endowed scholarship fund. So one of the thoughts that we had going forward is looking at a couple. One is the possibly taking, instead of taking 0% property tax this year, the board might consider taking the full amount of a property tax assessment, 3%, and then consider the expiration of the Lake City renewal district that will come in the following year. And when you add both of those amounts together, you get to about a $960 or so thousand revenue stream. So again, this may be something we want to talk about more fully tonight, or certainly at a later time. As we're looking at fall enrollment, the idea now, pre-COVID-19, was to see if we could put something in place for the fall semester and use this fall as a soft launch for a Promise-like scholarship program, and then fully work on marketing and getting the word out with the school districts, and activating also the foundation board's interest in doing fundraising to supplement the funds that we would need to drive a program like this. So you have a one-pager that we provided that shows a draft of what a mocked-up program might look like for Kootenai County. It's much more conservative than the numbers. For example, it only includes fall enrollment, not spring enrollment. But so those are just some structure of what it might look like. So just present that for the board's information. Trustee Dunlap, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Chris.
Well, I guess the only comment I want to make is that a lot of the thought and planning was done pre-COVID-19. And, that may very well change the picture a little bit in terms of what we want to do budget-wise in relation to this particular program. So, maybe this is something we need to discuss a little bit more at the April workshop.
Sure. And again, the reason, it's one of those things where with the uncertainty in front of us, there's certainly a case to put it on hold. There may also be a case to say, given some enrollment concerns that we have, this may be the time to actually activate something like this. One of the considerations that we'll need to think about as well is the legislative broil over property taxes this year, and some of the legislation that was drafted that we were a little bit concerned about, that would really limit what we were able to do future forward around foregone taxes in particular, and then also limiting the amount of percentages that we might be able to take going forward. So we also have that as a unique consideration for the current year, because our thoughts are that topic's not going to go away, that it'll be back on the legislative agenda in the next year.
Rick,
Well, the only thing is, oh, go ahead.
Thank you. I like the idea of taking the, when the urban renewal district expires, the Lake District, and taking those tax dollars and actually reinvesting them back into our actual constituents, when, helping them go to school. So that's a good plan. I would need to have some more discussion about any further tax increase on top of that. And because I think the uncertainty, just as you spoke to, we don't know what kind of shape everyone's going to be in. And so if it ends up that it takes us 2 years to launch this, because those urban renewal dollars, we need to wait to get a big enough fund, I mean, that's something to talk about too. But I absolutely support that idea, because I think we're clearly taking those tax dollars that have been diverted and supporting our own citizens.
Thank you. And also, one other consideration would be the foundation is interested in working on this, and so even if a portion of it's going to be a multifaceted approach when it's all said and done. So Yeah, again, this is just to have it out there for discussion so that everybody can see what the model, a potential model might look like.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to be, if I may, Dr. McLennan, just share another piece of that and provide clarity. The vision was that whatever is set up, it would be set aside in a specific reserve and managed much like we've managed the capital investment reserve, which was making a commitment and then following through on that commitment and using those dollars for the purpose in which the board designated. And I just want to make sure that part was clear, because I think that, again, not commingling those funds, if you will, into the general operating accounts, but leveraging them as a specific pool. The board has a fantastic track record of making a commitment to the taxpayers on how they've used those dollars and then doing exactly what you said you would do. And if that was the case with this, I think that sets an important precedent for us to continue to operate with that level of consistency.
Thanks, Chris. I'm glad you brought that up. And the idea of investing in our community this way, I think we'd be able to generate a lot of buy-in for that. And frankly, if we want to get people to get into programs that we need for our community, the impact that this ultimately should have on enrollment would be substantial.
Yeah.
You know, that might be a nice balance to use those funds as Christy suggested, but then also to be cautious with the tax increase at this time just because of circumstances. But I think people would understand taking the other funds and investing them. I think that would make sense. So anyway, I think I echo what Christy was saying.
President McLennan, this is Joe here. Is there anything else that you'd like to cover with your staff?
No, Chris, I think we've got everything here.
I would just ask, thank you very much for this opportunity. We typically present the first reading in April, and that may need to change, and completely understand that. But if it's possible for us to put together a workshop earlier in April, so that we have time to respond to any changes that the board would like us to do. On a personal note, my staff and I would really appreciate having as much time as possible to respond to whatever questions and requests or changes the board may want to make.
Well, thanks very
Chris,
much. Go ahead, Christy.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that we're all going to have some time on our hands. So whatever you need, Chris.
Yeah, Chris and staff and President McLennan, thank you so much for this workshop. It helps us get a little more focused. April will help a little bit more. And then as we move towards finally defining and approving a budget. Ken Howard, Trustee Howard, was not able to tune in. He could hear what was going on. He just called me on the phone. And so he's driving up to my house right now, so he won't be as frustrated during the normal meeting as he was during the workshop where he couldn't speak. So he'll be here pretty quick. With that, if there's no other business, we'll go ahead and sign off, and then we'll have to re-sign in with those new numbers for the board meeting at 6 o'clock.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
All righty, we'll see you in about 15 minutes.
Thank you. Bye-bye.